Welcome to Bring Out Your Badass Self, a movement to break your negative thoughts and habits and instead focus on building each other up and encouraging fearless authenticity.
Each week, we will get vulnerable and share experiences alongside our guests and audience. Come rediscover your inner badass self.
Good morning.
Good morning. It has been quite a morning already, and so on both of our sides. And so I didn't get to talk to Cate and Jenna and Oscar this morning, but I had a guest with me last night, and so it was a different morning for us. And then it's also my husband's birthday, so yes, I want to wish him a happy birthday. He is now no longer 2 years younger than me; he is only 1 year younger, and so you'll notice we're starting out a little bit different this morning. And so we just want to welcome everyone. Cate and Jenna, you've been up for how long now?
16 minutes?
Yeah, I was going to say 17
16
minutes. I'm not sure. Our alarms didn't go off.
So
Are they silent? I don't know.
We have Oscar on this morning. We had some snafus trying to get everybody on, but we made it. And so everything works out for a reason, and everything worked out just fine. It happened the way it was supposed to, right?
Yep.
So welcome. We have Oscar on today. So as people are joining us, Myra says good morning. And then we got some other Facebook users. How long until he catches up and passes you? Oh, my husband. Good question. And then someone else says good morning, badasses. So I think he's looking forward to not passing me. So he likes being the younger man.
Oh yes, I think doesn't Jay say that you rob the cradle because he's younger than you?
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, rob the cradle. I'm like, you're a year younger. And he's like, well, sometimes too.
Jay.
So how are you feeling this morning, Oscar?
I'm good. A little tired, but hanging in there. I'm the exact opposite. So they've been up 17-ish minutes. I've been up 18 hours.
Exactly. Because do you work the night shift, right?
Yeah. So I was actually at their house like 30 minutes before I got to work. So when Jenna last saw me, I'd been awake.
So after this you're just gonna crash. You're gonna go to sleep.
Yesterday.
No, I don't have time.
What?
I was at the gym this morning, and then I'm going back for a status update. So yeah, no, I'll be good.
Man. All right. Well,
He's young.
I do remember those days. Not anymore. I need my sleep.
Yes.
And so, well,
Definitely.
if you are joining us this morning, please say hello. Let us know that you are here. As you can see, we have a very special show for you today. So we're going to be focusing on from struggles to strength. And Oscar has graciously joined our show today to be able to talk about youth mental health. And we have so much to cover today. And I'm excited about the topic. We also have Cate and Jenna, Oscar's parents, joining us as well to be able to provide some further insights into his journey and things like that. So, Oscar, I want to go ahead and just jump in. And as people have questions, feel free to ask questions. You know, a part of today's show is really about being able to help parents as they're dealing with kids that have mental struggles in their lives, and then also to be able to help your kids. So this may be an episode that you decide that maybe your kids should see to understand and see someone that has gone through things and just provides them a little bit more understanding of the challenges they may be going through. So, Oscar, I'm going to jump into the first question that I really want to ask you. And so I know growing up, you had a little bit of a unique birth, as far as how you were chosen to be born. And so can you talk about that? And then also you have a unique perspective of even growing up in the different dynamics of your parents, and maybe just give us a little bit of a painting of a picture of your child life and childhood, and just to understand a little bit more about your past as you started into the world.
All right. Well, I don't remember all the early nitty gritty details.
You don't?
Yeah. Some memories. It's like, hey, was that light? I'm not sure. Basically, Cate had gotten out of college and had a good job and always wanted a kid. And for some reason, she wanted a biracial kid. She's like, well, I want my kid to be brown. So, what did single lesbian Mama Cate do? Find one.
Yep.
Pretty much it.
Mhm. Now, did you know your father growing up?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No.
Do you know who
I
your father is?
Not really. All I know
Okay.
is his last name is Lee. He's about an inch shorter than me. Was a professional singer, I believe. Yeah,
Okay.
that's about it.
Yeah. Now, for a while, it was just you and Cate, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
until I was probably 1.5, 2.
Okay.
Um, yeah, it was. I have a couple memories of that. I primarily just a lot of eating popcorn, ironically.
Eating popcorn. Now,
I really like popcorn.
yeah. And so, what other people were surrounding you and influencing you as you started to grow up?
Um, Obviously, Mama Cate, Mama Jenna, and then Lex, godmother, kind of.
Okay.
Um, she.
Welcome. She wants to join.
Hi, Carl.
Is that Carl a boy?
Yes. Yep.
Oh, hello.
Yeah.
Wants to join the call.
He's attention starved. I normally cuddle him after work.
Oh.
So Lex and Cate met in college and fast friends,
Mm-hmm.
and she was kind of just like almost not really a third mom, but like almost like an aunt, godmother. Like she was like the first babysitter we would call. I would with Lucas and Brandon, my two younger brothers.
Mm-hmm.
For a while, they spent I think every other weekend at their biological father's house, and I think so. I don't know what their thinking was. I think it was so I wouldn't feel left out. So every other weekend, I went to Lexus.
Yep.
Wow.
So it just she just kind of became like it was definitely very interesting. I learned how to play baseball very young. She was a very big baseball enthusiast. It was crucial that I could throw and catch hit. That and drinking a lot of sparkling water. A lot.
That came from Pop Pop too,
Yes.
Yes.
who you spent a lot of time with also.
Yes. Yep. Still do if I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
great.
a lot of other than Pop Pop, there have been like zero male influence at all.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How did that influence you, being around so much feminine energy?
I'll rewind, but my friends would kind of joke with me because when I would stand, unironically, I'd like put one hip out and like plant one hand, and just like it's stereotypically feminine, and I would do it without even thinking, and still do. They would kid at me. They're like, Oscar, you're standing like a girl, and I'm like, I'm just standing. Sorry. So that's part of it, but it never bothered me. It never was like, it didn't feel like I was missing something.
Yeah.
Like, because I mean, I don't know. Everyone always asks, how did it feel growing up without a dad? I was like, I don't know. There was never like a gap because it was just me and Cate, and then me, Cate and Jenna, and then me, Cate and Jenna, and a bunch of other kids. Like, like there was never anyone to lose. So it was just kind of how it was. I never felt a gap. There, yeah, and because for anything, almost anything, like Lex would qualify. She was pretty handy, so like we would mountain bike race together. And she was not a girly girl. Like I would fall doing something and like scrape my knee, and instead of babying me, she'd be like, "Get up, yeah, that was a good one." So like, yeah, there was no like man in my life, but there was plenty of masculine energy.
I was going to say the same thing because Cate and I have talked about how we feel that we have a lot of masculine energy within us, and I think that that's, even though you don't have necessarily a man in that is a father figure per se, you still had masculine energy influencing you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Plus, if we're really acting up, Cate has a dad voice. Horrifying. To this day, like I'll be like, over the weekend I went over for dinner, right? And someone was across the house and couldn't hear us. They heard Cate. I was sitting right next, and I like, even though I knew it was coming, I still like low key snapped to attention. I was like, oh,
I have not seen that part of Cate. Cate getting all serious.
Yeah,
It's been passed down through. I mean, her dad also has a dad voice.
Mm-hmm.
I've only heard that one once, and it's more scary.
Yep. Yes.
Oh, well, by the way, Carmen's also said good morning, happy Friday. And then someone else joined. Just so you know, we can't see some of the Facebook users. So they said morning, love you, Oscar. So I'm not sure who that is, but it seems like you have some love coming your way from people that are joining to see you today. And so let's jump into a little bit more as you continue to grow, and maybe just set the stage. How old are you right now? Tell people what it is you do right now, and just a little bit more about your current life.
All right. I'm 18 years old. I've been living on my own since about 4 days after I turned 18.
Okay.
So 5 months ish. Yeah, almost exactly. It's the 17th. Yeah. 5 months. I work in a steel mill. I operate overhead cranes primarily. But I'm hoping to get into the maintenance position there. That's what I was working with today.
Okay.
I got to learn a lot today. Got fair amount of new scars. So,
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah, this little stuff.
Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah.
Well, Oscar, the things that I want to reflect upon related to you, whenever I met you, the thing that I noticed about you is, one, you're an extremely hard worker. I also noticed that you are very much a nurturer. like you took care of people. Whenever I met you, that was one of the things that you also, I saw that a part of you, you have very much a nurturing personality in you. And so I want to maybe touch upon or start to get into a little bit more about over the past year, you went through counseling, some pretty in-depth counseling, but maybe talk a little bit about prior to that, some of the things that you dealt with. And the reason that I want you to talk about these things is because kids that may listen to this, that may be going through things, I want you to state the things that you were struggling with. And then I want to talk to Cate and Jenna to get their reflection of that time period as parents. So if you can give us a little bit more related to as you were growing up and reflecting back on the things that you dealt with.
Where do I start?
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot. I believe I went to my first therapist when I was 6 or 7.
Okay.
That was a big thing. They always had me in some sort of therapy because they were like, well, there was a point where I was like, well, we don't know what to do, so these professionals will help, right? Yeah, they did. I learned a lot. I think the biggest thing that held me back was that even though I learned all these skills and ways to manage emotions and not act on impulses, I just plain didn't want to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was just, I was kind of set in my way of thinking of why do I need to listen to anyone ever?
Mm-hmm.
And I just, Cate put it really good one day. I came out of the womb not wanting to be parented.
I remember that statement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that just kind of continued on. Like, I just never, it's not that I couldn't understand what they were saying or what they wanted me to do. It's that some part of me, I think it's called oppositional defiant disorder.
Mm.
Some part of me just didn't agree. I was like, well, no, why am I going to do that? Why should I do that? It's a blessing and a curse but growing up, it is primarily a curse.
Because you were very defiant. Is that what they sort of dealt with?
To a baseline, yeah. That and the different dynamics. So it was, for a while, they had, Cate and Jenna had 2 entirely different parenting styles. Me being, I figured that out fairly early, so I would act significantly different between the 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Recipe for disaster. Quickly. It didn't go well.
So paint the picture for us. How was Cate? What was her parenting style?
Because it was mostly when she'd be working, so it would be, it was, so Jenna has always been the primary care. Like,
Mhm.
Jenna was there with us day to day, all the time, constantly. So that meant that depending on how they were communicating, some things could be gotten away with Cate that very well couldn't be with Jenna. So I would exploit that as much as I could. I know.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Do you feel like other kids, is that any different than other kids? Or do you You had lots of siblings. So being defiant as a kid, I'm just trying to figure out, how would a parent know that this is something that needs help versus this is just something that is a stage and they're just going through the defiant, because I think all kids at some point become defiant. So what is it about your situation that was different?
Um, I think a lot of it stemmed from lack of trust.
Mm.
I, for some reason, just never, like, it never crossed my mind, and it couldn't, that they had my best interest or the best interest of the household
Oh, wow.
ever. It was never for. I was always. I was, and it was mostly irrational, just seated in a place of self defense. Like,
Hmm.
these people aren't me. Why do they know what's best for me? Whether you were a parent, a teacher, a therapist, like, I just was like, well, you're not me. How do you know what's best for me? How do you know what I want? How do you know what I need? You
Mhm.
don't. Or I thought you didn't. I told myself you didn't, and I wouldn't listen to you because I told myself I didn't. It was a lot of unconsciously talking myself into a hole and then refusing to come out of the hole.
So Cate and Jenna, hearing him talk about this, how does that impact you? How do you feel about that? Any other further things you would add?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Why do you want to know?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I think Oscar, you did a really good job of explaining it. You're so well spoken, and I'm really proud of you. And I know talking about this, I don't know if it's easy, but you're doing a wonderful job
Mhm.
making it seem very easy, and you're very confident. And he's hitting every nail on the head, from his own perspective to what was going on outside of that. And so, yeah, he was defiant, and he would, pit us against each other. And I think that happens with every kid, like you said.
Mhm.
Um, but for him, when we would come in and say, hey, this can't happen, Mama Kate's working, or this type of behavior is unsafe. And so, Mama Jenna needs to make sure you're safe, and we'll talk it through. In his head, he had already created that whole of, she doesn't know what's safe. What does she care if I'm safe? I'm gonna do it anyway. Like, and that was always the, I'm gonna do it anyway, that we didn't know about. So because of the lack of trust, that was never shared with us until years later, when a therapist just recently finally was able to get him to, I don't know, pinpoint that and
Yeah.
help him share with us that there was something going on where he was always in his head about unwilling to trust. And I think that might be I don't know, that's just the way his brain was wired. Mm-hmm. And so no matter what words we used or therapists we had, that wasn't going away without a big intervention later on.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think for us, in hindsight, maybe we could have done some things slightly differently. There's always ways that you can improve, right? When you look backward.
Sure.
But for us, there was this also, we were combining families too, even though they were very young, and we were coming in with two different types of parenting techniques.
With a blended family and toddlers.
Blended toddlers, right? And I already knew that there was something different about Oscar, and I couldn't pinpoint it, but I knew that he struggled from a very young age. It was parenting a kid that I looked around, and I had other friends at the time that had kids, and no one was having these same types of struggles that I was having. And so I came into the relationship, and Oscar was 4. So there was a little bit of longer time. There was 4 years of where we were on our own, but we met early and went back and forth.
I joined his life when he was 1.5, but we moved in together when he was 4.
Okay. And that's when we like started living together. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In Wisconsin Rapids, right?
Yes. Yep. And so where I'm going to is there was a long time where I was almost enabling some behaviors because I was so scared that he wasn't being seen, that I knew we couldn't figure him out, but I was scared she wasn't seeing him. I was scared I wasn't seeing him. I didn't think I knew best. I just had no idea how to help him. And I was always terrified, just terrified of what he could do, because I could see he did take such huge risks. He made such scary decisions at times that that it was really, really hard for us to be on the same page.
And I do believe that later on now, as we've been parenting for 18 years, and we've read a lot of books and we've talked to all these professionals, and kiddos are able to pick up on your energy. And I think Cate's energy of seeing it as an adult and being afraid, I do believe that led to Oscar's energy of lack of trust, which also, and then mine, because we were just kind of all living in fear.
So we were all scared, right? Jenna was scared as the primary parent. She,
we had poor communication in the beginning, because when I would say, hey, I'm really worried about this, this, and this, Cate was unable to communicate about that yet because of fear. So I know that Oscar picked up on that energy.
And Oscar, before we came on, you talked about sort of the influence sometimes of parents. And so sometimes when parents still have things to figure out themselves, because we're still growing individuals as well and still learning along the way, that then can also impact you. So even though you started early on getting counseling, were your parents getting counseling at that same time?
No.
Reflecting back, do you guys think that would have been something, you getting counseling maybe? And I don't know, Cate, had you gotten counseling?
I was in therapy the entire time.
Okay. Yeah. He didn't know that.
He didn't know that, right?
Yeah.
So I was in therapy,
and I was in therapy on and off that time. And then the kiddos therapists bring you in and they work with you and you have parent sessions. But what I think would have helped had we done some parent coaching or something along that line, I'm not sure, with Oscar, without Oscar, I'm not sure, but it definitely would have helped.
And I also think being young parents and being overwhelmed parents, we had kids from the foster care system in our house. We had all sorts of things going on. So we were super overwhelmed. If I could go back, I would try to change that aspect, right? Because we didn't have space or air, but when we were seeing these professionals, we didn't always trust, because we were so afraid and we were all having trust issues. We just did some of the things that they suggested, and some of them were really harsh and not okay.
And they didn't go along with our parenting style. And not just with Oscar, with some of our other kiddos, there were some parenting suggestions that didn't feel right that we followed.
We did anyway, because
but we wouldn't now. I mean, we're veterans. We would say absolutely not.
Give some examples of what some of those suggestions were that you were like, this, hindsight, you were like, that's not a good suggestion.
Definitely. With Oscar specifically, or with one of the other kiddos, or
with Oscar maybe specifically. Okay. Yeah.
Well, a little later on, as I think Oscar was around 12, maybe, we had a very highly recommended therapist
that we fought.
There was a wait list. We had to fight to get in. Hey, he needs this help. We drove 45 minutes every time to see him. He would bring us in, and normally it would be me. Cate would come sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And his suggestion after chatting with Oscar just a few times and getting to know him was, he thinks he understood Oscar. So again, it felt right. He would say, he saw him. He understands how your dynamic's working and how to get under your skin and what to do here to cause issues. And he'll do it whenever he decides he wants to do it. So what I would like you to do is, and I just want you to try it, is to do the same thing back to Oscar. So if something happens, if he causes a scene, the consequence of that should be cruel and unusual. And those are the words he used. And it was triggering at the time, but he was just this well-spoken gentleman. And he said, and I don't want that to scare you, because I'm not asking you to beat him or to physically harm him. But if how did he said
he wanted here was his logic, and it actually, we were at the end of our rope, so we were willing to try anything. And he was like, okay, so because Oscar's behavior is unpredictable and random, the consequences should be unpredictable and random. And so instead of like having natural consequences, which, as a gentle parent, you always wanted to have the consequences communicated well. Like, here's what happens if you get in trouble in our household. And that's how it always was, right?
Right.
He wanted that to be thrown out. And what we told Oscar is, because your behavior is erratic, and
so will the consequences.
The consequences will be.
And it went against everything, because honestly, at that point, we were learning gentle parenting, we were learning attachment parenting, and that's what we were doing. We were co-regulating. His emotions would be really high, ours would be really high. So we were learning to regulate and then talk to him. And the therapist was absolutely not. That is, he's just going to take advantage of that. Get rid of that. And so that was one of the things. So if Oscar, it was Wednesday morning and everything was going great, and then Oscar had a behavioral issue, we had to do something very big. Well, now you're grounded for a week, or now you lose your entire video game system for this one thing. It has to be unpredictable. And that was something that I would never do it, no matter what professional told me to do that now.
No, I mean, and I'm like embarrassed to admit, like,
I'm very embarrassed.
He missed a vacation, a family vacation,
per the therapist,
like, as a part of this, like
a couple.
Yeah, we just had, we were at the very end of our rope and had no clue what to do. So we followed this guidance. And so I think one of the messages that I want to give to the parents is, and especially
your child best.
Yeah. And like,
you really need to stick with that.
There's a place, and you'll hear as we continue to talk about Oscar's story, like, we needed an intervention to help. I mean, so there's a place for professional services, but
it wasn't that type of intervention that we needed. And because I think we both knew that we needed some sort of intervention that felt, well, he doesn't have to leave the house. This isn't happening. He's staying with grandma and grandpa and he's safe. And that's how the therapist would walk us through that. You're not harming him. He's in a safe environment. He knew that this would be on the table. And we still regret that to this day. And I think we both knew then this doesn't feel right.
So Oscar, listening to all of this, what emotions do you feel from this?
A lot.
Yeah.
While it didn't ever harm me physically, all it did was create distance. So because the other kids they had their set consequences, they're set. Like, if you did this, that happened, yada, yada, yada. What it did for me mentally was probably when I really started bottling, which really, really, really didn't do well.
Yeah.
Because it just separated me from everyone. There was a while where I didn't really feel like part of the family. Like, I was just there. Like, I did my chores, or I was in my room. Like, Yeah, I was there. I was on vacations, but like mentally,
Hmm.
no. Like I didn't feel a part of the whole.
Yeah.
So, um,
What do you think would have
that
helped you earlier on? Like during this, if they hadn't have listened to that person, you said trust was an issue. How could how could they
yeah.
have gained your trust at that earlier age?
At that point, before that, it would have been really difficult because I was still kind of seated in the they can't help me.
Mm,
I don't I don't really know how
mm. What if they
I
just
When
think
you look,
simply hugged you and loved you? What do you think that it wouldn't have done anything?
not for me, not for me.
Not
But
for you.
because we
We
did.
did that, yeah.
Yeah.
There was lots of loving, amazing times.
yeah, yeah.
What I
It's
wish
just
we had done then, and I don't know, I mean, I wish we had leaned in further.
Accepted more.
Accepted more, radically accepted that this is who he is.
Mm.
And, you know,
This might randomly happen on a Wednesday morning or a Saturday evening when we're all ready to have a good time.
and that's okay. Right? That's
More acceptance.
that's what I wish. So as
Mhm.
one of the things that I
We
want,
both wish.
yes, like that's huge. We talk about it all the time.
Say that again. What did you say?
We both wish that there just would have been more radical acceptance around who Oscar was rather than always trying to fix it. Because the other kids were struggling or we were struggling and it was causing issues, leaning in, like what you just said. And if he wanted to share, he could share, but honestly, like it should have just been okay. And, you know, screaming happens and it wasn't, you know,
It should.
I see where you guys were coming from though, because I wasn't the only variable. It's like there were so many other kids with various traumas, especially the foster kids.
Mm-hmm.
Me added on to that, like there were times where like I'm looking back on it and I'm like, it's like sometimes it might have just been, this is gonna sound terrible, but it might have just been better to like not remove me from the equation, but like I feel like you guys needed it. Like I didn't want you guys to focus on me the entire time. At the time, I was just basically a quiet ball of rage entirely, just kind of
A simmering ball of rage, right?
yeah, yeah.
And
The kids would pick up on it, and then everyone would start acting out, and it would just be a chain reaction.
Right.
So at times, it was the safest and easiest to say, okay, Oscar's at Grandpa and Grandpa's, no Grandma and Grandpa's. Like, I don't blame any of you guys, like either of you, for the choices. Like, you chose the safest route for everyone. Like, I'm okay. Like, it seems really harsh in hindsight, but knowing how I thought back then and how unpredictable and like sneaky and just all around deceiving, like it, you chose the smart option. It was the hard and painful option, but it had to be done, honestly.
And you went, so you, let's talk a little bit about the past year or more.
2 years.
2 years. Yes, that you went inpatient. You went
Yeah.
outside of the house. And so can you talk a little bit about what was it like at the very beginning, being away from your parents, going into an inpatient mental institute, correct? Tell us a little bit about the setting.
Okay, it's hard to.
Was it a hospital? Was it what was the?
It's
It's a residential facility.
it's a residential treatment facility.
Okay.
And it's kind of unique for its style. Most other facilities like that were large, almost ranches that had multiple big houses that were used for the same thing. That's how Hami Home is set up and how Rawhide is set up.
So
And
Rawhide would be an example. I think Rawhide is nationwide, right? Or no?
I don't
no,
know.
Have you heard of Rawhide?
Rawhide's just Wisconsin because it's
Okay.
like primarily sponsored by the Packers. It's like
Okay.
it's a Wisconsin thing up in New London.
Yeah.
But this specific one was family services.
Yes, which has I think it's mostly like Green Bay, Brown County. They don't just have a residential. They have a bunch of clinics. They have outpatient therapists. It's kind of like a city county-wide like mental physical health type thing. They kind of just, and it's all like primarily state funded.
Yeah.
Family services residential in itself. It was basically a big cross-shaped building. And two of the crosses were wings, and each wing had 9 rooms. Each room had a bed, and then you were allowed a certain amount of things. There were kind of rules if you kept it clean. Like I think one of the rules technically was only 3 pairs of shoes. I broke that one very quickly.
Because that's what you did, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, there wasn't a rule at Res. There was a very few rules at Res that I didn't break several times.
Mhm. Uh-oh. Someone's trying to call him, I think. There we go.
Okay.
He's back. Oh, can't hear you. Something happened to your sound. So I think someone tried calling him. This happened earlier. So
Oh, okay.
we'll see if he joins back. So the place that
Can you
he
hear me?
went, yes, we can hear you now. And so the place that you went, when you first went in, you said you broke a bunch of rules, right, from the beginning.
Mhm.
How long while you were in do you feel like you started to establish trust with people that they actually wanted to help you? How long in?
A while.
Like a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. It
was
took a
hard.
long time for me to trust my therapist, Alexa.
And what is it that person did to help you trust them?
A lot of it was time.
Okay.
And the cool part about family services is that everything is reported. So with outpatient therapists, I knew that I could lie. Like I could simply say, and from a young age, I was just always knew how to do this. Was just slowly like say like, oh yeah, I've been using these skills, yada yada. It's been helping me a little bit. And then they would think that my parents were just lying. I got discharged from this one therapist by doing that. I remember it was with Jenna. I remember walking out and I was like, oh, so I'm discharged. And she was like, yeah, we both know you need more. I remember walking out Trevor Husky's office in Wauwatosa that last session. It was like only 4 sessions. And I
I was
remember
going to say, he maybe saw you 4 times and he said, this kid does not need therapy. And so we're not talking about when he was in treatment now. This is just prior, the amount of therapists he had where he didn't trust them, but he knew what to say to them to make them feel trusted and that he didn't need it. And yeah, that happened quite a few times.
So with Alexa, though, because she knew my entire history and everything that happened at Res, if I acted this certain way, she knew. So there was no hiding anything. That was a big part of it, was learning that I cannot lie to Alexa. And if I do, I look like an idiot and it doesn't work. So that was the biggest part of it, was that first, like, okay, I kind of have to be real now. And then
so Alexa did what we wanted to do.
Oh, yeah, we would always say, no, we know you're lying, we know this, and then Oscar would actually say, Alexa says the same things you guys said.
So like I think, it was so she was able to literally monitor. So
She's an earth angel.
Yes. But one of the things that I think Stephanie Reynoso just mentioned it, we never gave up. That is so true.
We made it through.
We never gave up. We always fought. We fought for every single therapist we saw. We fought to get in there. We fought to find the right specialist.
And prior to family services, Oscar had a few inpatient stays that lasted like about a week. And I would drive, because Cate was working, I was down there every day meeting with them and talking to the family therapist. I mean, we always did fight. We always did.
We were very engaged.
Stay committed to that.
Yes.
And throughout family services, they did weekly therapy, and Alexa would include us.
And I think what was hard for us at the time is that we were awesome parents, right? We had these other foster kids with huge needs in and out of our house.
Mm-hmm.
We had our kids. I mean, we had
blended, and we
were fucking rocking it, and we had professionals in our lives because they were telling us this all the time. Like, you guys are doing amazing. Except we couldn't help this kid.
We couldn't help, right?
Like, there was one kid that we couldn't help, and it was, and we couldn't ever figure it out. But we were getting it right in so many ways with so many other complex scenarios.
Yeah.
But we didn't give up.
Yeah, we didn't give up. And again, accepting that we needed that big parenting intervention and family intervention was hard. But once Oscar started to break down his walls and trust after that year, we started to see changes. And that was, I mean, amazing, explosive in the best way.
Yeah. So, Oscar, you said during a period of time that you were very manipulative, that you would do certain things that would basically, you knew how to deceive people. What is it that ended up breaking down that wall to then say, okay, that's not really serving me well?
That was arguably the hardest to break down.
Yeah.
Because I was so used to it. I think a good part of it was probably Alexa, because what she would do, and this made it very difficult to me to even like talk to staff, was I'm pretty sure she literally made sure to tell every new staff and all the existing ones that I'm gonna try. So when I would receive consequences for breaking various rules, like there was no talking around it.
Mm-hmm.
I think I got out of a consequence once, and it was because I genuinely didn't do it, and I had 2 people to prove it other than me. But that was the biggest part of it, was that humbling factor of, and I think it just slowly started to like kind of sink in, like, all right, you can't really be doing this to people. Like, it's not right.
Yeah.
That's another piece that makes this whole thing a little bit more interesting, is the empathy piece.
Yeah. Do you feel like you were taught empathy?
Definitely. Totally taught. Yeah. Like, both of them are extremely empathetic. Thing is, with me, it has to be cognitive. So I have to almost process through the empathy and be like, oh, okay, that makes sense because of this, because they could feel this. It's not like, it's a process. Because I think how they put it was, naturally, I was kind of just born sans empathy. Like, it just never really was a thing. And it was apparently like that early on. They were telling me stories of when I was in school for the couple of years that I just didn't care what I said. Like, there would have been, say, if we were in a reading circle, I would literally ask the teacher to skip certain kids because they were slower readers. Out loud. Like, I just didn't process, like, oh, that could be hurtful.
Right.
Like, they just wasn't there.
And that's so odd to me because Jenna especially is an extremely empathetic person. Like every time she talks, empathy is just, seeping out of her. And so it's not learning, like you were surrounded by empathy.
Yeah, I
It
was
just
taught it
yeah,
perfectly, like great
exactly.
examples. It's just didn't click. Like,
Yeah.
He didn't. Well, I think we didn't have some of the pieces together. We didn't know. We didn't have the right diagnoses, right? We didn't know.
we had so many diagnoses.
We had so many diagnoses, but not the right ones, not the ones that.
And I did try to teach empathy rather than just modeling it, or when I'm talking, him feeling it.
Yeah.
I went, and, because we homeschooled, I would go to the library and I did a lot of research on books that would teach it, where the character would, be struggling in school and then need empathy or something like that, or when he was little, Charlotte's Web, that's supposed to be a book that teaches empathy. And so he was an amazing reader. He loved reading. So I took that route, but it still didn't sink in for him.
And so family services was able to finally get the right diet with pulling all of the pieces together. It's just like somebody finally put him under a microscope in the right way, right? So they listened to us.
They listened to him.
They got the right, neurological things.
Yeah, I did a full neuropsych eval there.
Okay.
Which one of the biggest first, but...
No.
And I think the big thing was most kids, being removed from the home, it's very traumatic, and that maybe would shape you up. And not for Oscar, he's still stuck by this, and I think it more enforced his lack of trust. And so it took a little over a year. It took a long time for him to actually start working with the therapist and the resources there.
Wow. I'm just thinking I'm thinking as a parent how hard this would have been. Like, you see how smart he is. You see he has so many great qualities, but there's this thing that you don't know. Like, he just keeps lying and he keeps manipulating, and you're like, why is he acting like this? Like, what is it? And I'm just thinking as a parent, you start to self-reflect, and you always go like, what did I do? What did I not do right? All of those types of things, when in actuality, in this situation, this was something that was Oscar's. Like, Oscar this is really on him figuring out himself, and understanding his neurological makeup of things. And so I just can't imagine how difficult that was for all of you, because Oscar felt ostracized. He felt like not a part of the family. You guys were trying to make him a part of the family. You're also helping all these other people, and you're struggling saying, how can I help this kid? Like, we're helping all these other people, but we can't even help, Cate, you chose to have him. You were like, I want you in my life. And here you're struggling as a parent, wanting to love this child and, trying to help them, but you still had this child that didn't trust you.
Right. Yeah. And then you combine that with us both having our own traumas,
and
I think
our own,
it was harder. I mean, you had said he was a nurturer. I think it was harder for him. He probably felt, I don't know, maybe Oscar, you can answer this, not having that empathy and seeing, us bringing kids in and giving empathy and being surrounded by a lot of people that just felt empathy easily, and you didn't. Did that also make you feel different?
You guys know how, moms, how I analyze things. Like, I just kind of will watch someone do something and then do the same thing. That's what all the caretaking was just me memorizing, like, oh, okay, he's doing this, should probably do this, hope this will help. It was never oh, I feel bad for this, I'm going to try to do something. It was, this needs to be done because of this, because of this, because of this, because of this. So it kind of worked out how fast I think. because I could, like, it was all, it was never based off of emotion. It was just, this is what has to be done.
Right.
Um,
And so what was the diagnosis they ended up giving you, the final diagnosis?
it wasn't one set thing.
Okay.
From what I heard from Alexa, it was portions of different disorders.
The main one being autism.
Yep. That
Okay.
was the lack of empathy.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the lack of empathy, and then a lot of oppositional defiant.
ADD or ADHD?
ADHD.
Yeah. And then they were saying something about conduct only, and I still, how Alexa put it was, you don't want to fit into societal norms. And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't. And she's like, yeah, exactly. I'm like, yeah, okay.
But I don't know that anybody on this call wants to fit into societal norms.
Yeah.
I mean, so, I mean, like, you know, we all do it in different ways. So, but for me, empathy, you know, I'd always think about others, you know, in what it is I'm doing. I'm, you know, the autism, I guess, is what, you know, you were thinking about yourself, but you modeled the different things, but you weren't necessarily driven by helping others or doing things because you cared about others, or did you?
That's a tricky question.
Okay, that's why I asked. Yeah.
It wasn't that I like, it's not that I don't like love my family.
Mm-hmm.
It was that I didn't have that like emotional connection, like just with simply empathy. It wasn't like whenever I did anything, it wasn't because it wasn't the, it's hard to describe it because I don't know what empathy like naturally feels like.
Sure.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's not a lot to go off of. For me, I don't know, maybe you just kind of feel compelled just like to do something for someone because you see someone struggling.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, you just feel compelled. It's like, for me, it's a multi-step process. You have to kind of notice what's going on and then think about what you've done in the past and what could be done to try to help them.
Yeah. I love the fact that this is a testament that people can learn empathy.
Yeah, not easy.
Yeah.
You have to, but the biggest part of it is, the hugest part was realizing that I could.
Mm-hmm.
Is that that was the biggest obstacle, was realizing that just because I can't necessarily feel it doesn't mean that I can't still act on it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I do want to pull up something. Jennifer knows because she also has an autistic child. She said, interesting thought. Don't always see lack of empathy with autism. So it's not necessarily a part of autism. So a good point to sort of.
Which is why.
Can it go the complete opposite where you're like hyper empathetic? Isn't that kind of how JoJo is with how?
It's a complete spectrum. We also have other kiddos with autism in the home, and she's right. But that's how his manifested.
But it was also they're harder to diagnose for them. So they couldn't figure out what was. So that's why autism didn't come up from, I mean, it came up early. One of his first diagnoses around the 6 or 8 was autism. And then, you know, later it was like, no, that's not what this is. He's bipolar, you know? And so like we had all of these, like, so we literally had really, you know, you treat someone bipolar very differently than you would treat somebody who has autism, right?
Yeah.
So very all the way across the board, professionals, doctors, you know.
We actually had someone say there isn't anything wrong. He just likes doing this.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were, for a while, they were saying conduct disorder, which is what they call sociopaths when they're underage.
Yeah. Well, that's what I had always learned. So I studied criminal justice and psychology. And when people really lack empathy in understanding that's, I mean, as you were talking, I was like, wow, I was taught in college that this is called sociopath. Not, not psychopath, but sociopath. And it doesn't mean that that person will do mean things. It just means that they lack empathy and don't understand. And if they go down the path, it could lead to other things, because they can't relate to people in what it is how it is it might impact them. And so
Oscar definitely learned how to relate his actions to other people while he was at family services. And I will say the badass part of him came out, and now he's living on his own at 18 throughout all of these struggles. And he is doing it. He bought a car. He has his own place. He has a cat. He's respectful and doing amazing at work. And we get to see all of it unfold, and he comes over and visits, and we really feel like we just made it through a war, and we came out the other end, so we're really lucky.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel, Oscar, to hear that?
I mean, it feels good.
Are you just saying that? Do you actually?
Well, no, it's.
I'm asking.
It's for me.
How does it feel?
Yeah.
Wrong question.
What do you think about that question?
Okay. He's got lots to think.
For me, it's just living. I don't know. To me, it doesn't feel like an extreme good or bad. That's kind of the mindset I adopted from them. I don't remember how often I heard this, but one of you guys told me, like, the reason we're so successful in our various aspects is because when things are comfortable, instead of becoming stagnant and staying with the comfy, you keep pushing for more and more and more and more.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what I'm doing. Like, I'm planning my entire life several years into the future, step by step.
Yeah.
You're trusting in your process.
Yeah. That was another thing that I learned at Res helped, was like just the kind of simple stuff, like needing, like, the structure was nice, but at the same time I had to make my own. Whether, like, even how I structure my work days and like meal prep and like just like the little simple things, just because I'm weird in the way, like, once I fully understand something, I'm not forgetting it. Ever.
I think once Oscar understood that he was autistic, and he understood the way he thinks, but he started to actually embrace himself. And instead of thinking of himself as a fucked up person who likes to analyze everyone and manipulate things, because that's what he was, that's what his habit was, he saw himself as, oh, I have this kind of superpower.
I can analyze everyone and then use it for good.
I can turn these things into something else, right? And so we slowly saw, like, I think he had so much energy outward for so long to kind of game the system, right? To always find a way to get the next thing that he wanted, but in a deceiving, manipulative way. He was able to then turn those like focus powers into himself. So he started hyper focusing on working out and bettering himself. And that hasn't stopped. So all of that energy and that ability to analyze and really hyper focus on something, he's turned into just more positive things.
Yeah. I mean, I also saw, from you, whenever you visited, like, you're an amazing parkour person. So that risk-taking side of growing up and things like that, that's also, for me, I think it's amazing. Like, he went up a tree and like did a backflip, and I was just like, what the hell just happened? Just amazing capabilities when it came to just doing parkour, for example?
That was a big thing in therapy with Alexa, because it's kind of toned down. Well, just the deep down, like, adrenaline rush risk taking.
Uh-huh.
So what we did was we had several sessions just brainstorming safer or healthier ways that I could get that. We called it a risk quota. I
Yeah.
could get the risk quota filled so that I wouldn't have the urge to do something sneaky. Like, so work is actually really nice because I operate an overhead crane that
Could kill people.
Oh yeah, it carries 25 tons and it's an absolute piece of garbage. So if I'm not careful, one wrong click and that's sending 25 tons of hot metal into a person on each side. So it's pretty great for me because, like, there's that slow, constant risk. So it makes work interesting. I'm finding that maintenance is way more, though, because it's where there's like low constant level risk with my regular job. The maintenance is constant high level. It's like, oh, I have to tie down on this because I could fall off and die. That's another thing, is it toned down after the last concussion, but I had zero lack of self-regard. I think that might have been part of the empathy, was like,
he did not love himself.
Right.
No. And so I just didn't really care. It was like, am I flipping off a building? Okay, I'm flipping off a building. Like, there was no, oh, how did they put it? I was in AODA. Heather, yeah, I loved Heather. It was great. She was talking to me, and she was like, and a bunch of other people. She was like, do you ever, like, start doing something and then have that little voice in the back of your head that says, oh, this is dangerous, we can't do it, but then ignore it? And I'm like, I don't have that voice. I've never had that voice. It's never been, yeah, that's probably not a good idea. It's always been just either silent or hey, do it.
Wow.
So that was a big part of it, was realizing that I think it's a part of the empathy piece. It's a little bit better. After the last concussion, I kind of realized that I was mortal.
For me, that's a huge nugget that you just shared. So, as a struggling parent, asking your kids the inner voices that they hear, I think, is a key point of what it is that you're talking about. Because I'm saying, as you were talking, I was like, okay, so I'm still struggling. Like, as a parent, I'm like, what would I do? Like, okay, just send your child, that to a facility. Well, that's not really, necessarily the answer. And so you just, for me, just unlocked what it is that I think one of the key things that as a parent you can do, because we all do this. We all have an inner voice. Some people don't, from what I understand. But most people have an inner voice. So understanding what that inner voice is telling you is super critical. So you're a risk taker. Okay. Do you have that voice that's telling you, it probably shouldn't do this. This is dangerous. They lack empathy. Do they have something in their voice, their inner voice, that says, well, that would be a little mean, to do to someone. So that to me is a key, aha moment in what it is that you're saying as a parent, that we could really dig in with our kids to understand a little bit more about what inner struggles they're really dealing with. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's a good way to get to the core, because part of the issue is a lot of kids with autism that are higher functioning. They would have in the past been diagnosed maybe Asperger's potentially, because it really is a spectrum with all sorts of different needs, on that spectrum. But kiddos with autism or humans with autism learn to it's called scripting. They learn how to, like, handle situations because they've thought through it in their head, or they've watched people, so they know, like, ask her. That's kind of how. So we didn't understand that concept. So we could look at him and say, how can he be so successful in this one situation?
Yeah.
And then you just remove someone and put something else in, and it's the same situation, but he's not successful. And, it's because there was a script that he followed for that, but he didn't have a script for this. And that, because that's how he survived for so long. So I think the radical acceptance, absolutely key. And
never giving up.
Never giving up.
I mean, we went through over 10 therapists and we still didn't give up.
Yeah.
Always making sure you find the right fit and the right resources.
Mm-hmm.
And then leaning in, asking the deep questions, observing, really kind of trying to get to the root of it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes just giving time.
Yeah. Which is hard for anybody because we want that fixed. We're like, what? Why is it this way? I just want it, I just want to be normal, whatever normal is in your mind. But sometimes it's, and I think the title is very fitting because it struggles to strength. Now you're figuring out your superpower, your strength in what it is that you struggled with, and finding how you can now apply that in different ways.
Definitely. The a big way that I apply certain strengths, I still do this subconsciously, but every person that I interact with regularly that I don't really have an emotional connection with, basically everyone outside of family, I have almost a profile of their characteristics, their lingo, and instead of using that to try to manipulate or lie, sneak around because I kind of understand how they interact with me. Mm-hmm. I can just use it to better get to know them. And I was explaining this to Cate last night or the last morning. I don't know. My days are. Mm-hmm. You remember, Cate? I was saying that everyone I talk to, I always try to learn something in a conversation. That's why I like helping the maintenance guys, because they all know something about something, and normally it's a lot. So even while they're just talking and I'm working or listening around them, I'm learning about them as people so I can better interact with them, and B, the tricks of the trade, kind of oh, this tool would be more appropriate in this situation because we're worried about earlier today. We had to cut welds out of something to have it redone because it had shifted and buckled. And at first I was like, well, are we grinding them out? And they were like, oh, no, that would take way too long. I was like, oh, okay, so are we going to torch them out? And they're like, no, because then we could torch part of it, but we don't want to cut through. And I was like, oh, okay. And then they showed me this entirely new concept and tool that I had no idea existed. Pretty freaking awesome, by the way. It's crazy. And just like that, I have an entirely... it's really hard to describe how my brain kind of functions like that. Mm-hmm. It's like a word search mixed with a jigsaw puzzle. But the pieces are interchangeable, so you could flip them around. Mm-hmm. So I'm getting little bits of information from all over, and then I'm finding out where else I can apply them, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Right.
And mostly subconsciously, but sometimes I'm thinking, oh, I could do this with that, and this with that, and this with that. It's really overcomplicated. Really overcomplicated, but it's kind of the only way I can function. And it works for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's another huge thing is that you kind of, the whole term normal isn't really a thing. There's no set normal.
That's why
Like,
I put it with quotes.
yeah, you have to kind of figure out your normal, or where you're comfortable, happy, healthy, and you're not harming anyone
Yeah.
or yourself. Like it, and that's not easy, especially if you're a kid. Like, because you're figuring out who you are. So it's pretty hard to figure out who you are, and then at the same time try to figure out what you want to be.
Yeah.
It's it took me a long time.
But keep in mind, you're 18, and there are people that are 30, 40, 50 that are still going through this. And I'm sure that you will continue to have an evolution beyond this. So you're now, figuring out who you are now, but you'll go through more. Like there'll
Oh yeah,
be other
it's
things, yeah,
an
as you
open book.
continue on. Hmm.
Yeah, it's never ending. I'm still learning. I'm like, oh, this works better if I think this way. In certain situations, or like, well, I'm doing this. Turn your brain off so you don't overthink and just focus on the task at hand. There'd be
Well,
times when I'm at work and I'm writing something on, I'm hot marking on hot billets to identify them, and I'll be like I'll be building a cottage in the middle of nowhere in my head. Like I'm like, okay, I would do this, this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and then I realize like, oh, that number's wrong, that number's wrong, that number's wrong. Focus on that, Oscar.
It's great awareness. He has so much more awareness now, that really helps. And he now embraces who he is. He doesn't, he loves himself, and he isn't. Yeah. So you combine,
and he lets us love him now.
Yes, he lets us love him, and which is, it's the best.
Yeah.
It's the best. We've come so far.
Yeah. So, Oscar, I just wanted to thank you for being like so vulnerable today. You, I think, have given many people, including me, an eye-opening to things that we sometimes perceive about people and the struggles that sometimes people have. And sometimes you may think, oh, well, if someone's like this, that's not something that can be changed. So for me, I love the fact that I learned from today's conversation as well. And I hope that it's also an eye-opener for others as well. And I just really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story today.
Yeah, of course. I'm glad I can help.
Yeah. And so, well, what does the future hold? You're wanting to go into maintenance. What else does the future hold that Oscar has in desires for life?
Long term, short term, or mid?
Whichever you would prefer to focus on.
Shorter term, this spring I'm gonna buy a motorcycle.
Okay.
I already have one picked out, and I've rode my buddies from work motorcycle, and he's kind of helping me get into that, like, almost not biker mindset, but that, like, not the mindset, but like, he's just guiding me through it. It's like if I was helping someone, I don't know, he's just kind of running me through it all.
Learn how to fish or something, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like if I was showing someone how to design something in Minecraft, like it's basically what he's doing. So that's a big step. Yeah, after that, probably gonna start saving more.
Okay.
To buy a large chunk of land up north.
All right.
Yeah.
So that's the desire.
Yeah.
Motorcycle, then land.
Yep. Yeah. It's just gonna be slowly investing in things that'll make me happier.
That's good. I love that.
Yeah.
If everybody focused on that, that would be amazing. Just focus on things that continue to make you happier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, any final thoughts you want to leave our audience with, or Cate or Jenna?
I would Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I would say is never give up. Never ever give up. And
more acceptance for where you're at as a parent, where your kiddo is, and that leads to more connection in the moments, and that's really what matters.
Yeah.
And acceptance is the first step in any process of changing something. You have
Right.
to kind of know what you're dealing with in order to like fix something. So accepting where you are.
Yeah.
Oh, DBT's slogan. You remember? You're always trying the best you can.
you're
At that
doing the
moment,
best you can
you're
with the
always
skills you
doing the
have.
best.
Yes.
You're
And
always doing the best
DBT
you can.
therapy, that's another thing.
It's the dialectic statement. You're always doing the best you can, and there's always room for improvement. They seem like they're entirely opposite, but it's the same thing. Like right now, I'm doing the best I can. Can I
Yep.
go further? Absolutely.
Always.
Always.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And I know we are way over today.
Way over.
And so,
Yes.
but it was a great conversation. And I do want to leave you with a couple of things. Kim said, Oscar, you are too smart. And then Myra said to Oscar, thank you for sharing. And thank you, Jenna and Cate, for also being a part of this as well, because you guys are also very vulnerable, a part of this process of struggling as parents. And so, and I just love the fact that you didn't give up.
Thank you,
Yes, sir.
Sarah. Thank you for having us. And I just want to say hi to Kim.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining us. And Cate, do you want to end us as you normally do?
Yes, I do. So I hope that you can let this tale of struggles to strength fuel your Friday and your weekend. Let our badassery ignite, hopefully, your badassery, and that you all have a wonderful time.
Thank you.
Thank you.